If your family ever fed itself off its own ground and you couldn't grow a week of dinners today to save your life, sit down, neighbor. I need you to hear this. In 1936, a widow named Cora Ellison stood in an Ohio garden in the last week of July, hot sun on her neck, and dropped a handful of pale oval seeds into a bed she just pulled the early beans out of. She had 4 children in the house and no husband to send to town. From that patch and a milk goat and a dozen hens, those 4 children ate from October straight through to March. And Cora Ellison never handed a grocer a dollar between the first frost and the last one. Today, most Americans couldn't name what she planted that morning and couldn't feed their own family off their own ground for a week if the store shut its doors. But here's the twist. The crop she planted that day is still sitting on the seed rack for $2 a packet, and the folks who quietly took over her winter grocery bill are the reason you forgot her name. Before we go on, there's something coming for this country, and the news won't say a word about it till it's already on your doorstep. It comes down to one number: 3 days. That's what the stores hold for you. Your grandfather's pantry held a winter, and the difference was never money. It was knowing. 94 pages of that knowing in one book. Water, fire, curing, canning. The plants that heal and the ones that kill. Links are below. All right, back to it. What Cora planted that morning was a turnip, purple top, white globe, open pollinated, sown in the hottest week of the year on ground that had already given her one crop and set to feed her family clear until spring. That is the system. That is the whole thing you're looking at in my hand right now. 8, maybe 10 seeds, $2 a packet. And by the time we're done, you'll know how to sow it in your own bed this August, how to eat it twice off one planting, how to store it without a refrigerator, and how to save the seed so you never buy a packet again. There's one piece of this they worked hardest to make you forget, friend. The piece that turns a nice fall harvest into food on the table in March. We'll get there. I am a 7th generation on this ridge. My family's held it since the 1790s. And every word of what I'm about to walk you through, my grandfather Eli copied into a leather journal I still keep in the cabin. The same system fed 8 of them off this mountain through the Depression. Eli made me swear it wouldn't die with me. This is me keeping my word. None of this faded because it quit working, friend. The grocery aisle and the cold chain produce truck needed you buying a winter's worth of vegetables from them every week instead of pulling them out of your own ground. I'll show you how. By the time this is done, you will know every piece the way Cora knew it. You'll know the variety to buy. You'll know the exact week to sow. You'll know how deep, how far apart, how to keep the bed alive through August heat, when to cut the greens, when to pull the roots, how to hold them in storage without a refrigerator. And the one last piece nobody teaches anymore that makes this a system you never pay for again. Not a project, a capability, something you own for the rest of your life. Before we get in, tap subscribe. Not for me, because we are pulling this old self-fed way of eating back onto the homestead, one crop at a time, and the grocery aisle would rather you never relearned. There are 6 pieces to doing this right. Most folks who try it botch it because they miss one. The first 5 you can pick up in an afternoon. And if you stop there, you'll eat well from October to Christmas. But the 6th piece is the one they buried hardest. And it's the one that turns this from a nice fall crop into a crop that feeds you into March next year, and the year after that, and every year after that, without ever handing another packet seller a dollar. We build to it. So the question isn't what we lost, friend. It's who's getting paid because we forgot, and how you take that winter grocery bill back. The first piece is what you plant and the exact week you plant it. Get this wrong and nothing else in the system matters. Eli would stand at the edge of the bean bed the last week of July, sweat on the brim of his hat, and shake the packet in his palm the same way you'd sift feed. Pale seeds no bigger than a pinhead, oval, catching the sun. He'd say, "Sow these today, boy, and you'll eat off them till a redbud blooms." The variety is purple top, white globe, open pollinated, been in American seed catalogs since the 1800s. That is the variety to buy this year and the variety you will keep going yourself later. Any open pollinated garden turnip works, but do not buy a hybrid packet marked F1 for this system because a hybrid breaks the seed saving loop later. The week to sow is the last week of July or the first 2 weeks of August, depending on where you live. Rule of thumb, you want about 10 weeks of growing weather before your first hard freeze. Count backwards from your local first frost date and mark it on the calendar. The bed is wherever an early crop just came off. Peas, early beans, spring lettuce, spent garlic. Pull the residue, rake the surface. Work in a shovel of finished compost per foot of row. Level it flat. Do not use fresh manure near root crops this close to harvest. Well rotted only. This matters for food safety on a leafy and root crop the family will eat. One variety, one packet, one bed. Sow it in the last hot week of summer, and you have started a system that feeds you until March. Now this is the piece to hold on to, friend, because it explains everything. Between roughly 1945 and 1965, three things happened to the American winter table in a single generation. Refrigerators moved out of the rich neighborhoods and into every kitchen. The interstate trucking network went in, and a head of lettuce grown in California could sit in an Ohio grocery aisle in 3 days. And the chain supermarket produced section, that thing you now walk through every week, opened its doors coast to coast. In one lifetime, the job of feeding a family through winter moved off the back of a widow with a July turnip patch and onto a truck that pulls up to a loading dock. Nobody outlawed the turnip. Nobody had to. They just made sure the winter produce bill got paid to somebody else. Eli wrote this down in the summer of '43 in that leather journal on my desk in pencil. 3 lines. Last week, July, purple top row along the beans. That was the whole plan. Fed 8 kids until spring. The common failure is buying an F1 hybrid packet by accident. Fix it by reading the packet, looking for open pollinated or OP or heirloom. If it says F1, put it back. Another failure is sowing too early in the season. If you sow in June, the crop bolts in the heat and you get a woody root. If you sow in August in a cool climate, you may run out of days. 10 weeks before hard freeze is the honest number. The reason most seed racks are half hybrid now isn't because the hybrid tastes better. It's because a hybrid can't reproduce true to itself, so you have to come back and buy it again. That's a bill sold as convenience. This week, buy 1 packet of open pollinated purple top white globe turnip seed. That's step 1, $2. That's the piece everyone gets right. The next one is where most folks lose the crop before it ever sprouts. The second piece is how you actually put the seed in the ground. 2 numbers to remember. Miss either one and you get half a stand or a bed of tangled roots that won't size. The depth is 1/4 to 1 inch, not deeper. In a July-August bed, deeper means the seed sits in dry dirt and never breaks the surface. Row spacing is 12 to 18 inches apart. 12 if your bed is small and you'll thin aggressively. 18 if you want to walk the row and hoe weeds. Scratch a shallow furrow with a corner of a hand. Drop the seed thin along the furrow. Cover with fine soil the depth of your fingernail and press it down with the flat of your hand. That contact between seed and moist soil is what triggers germination. Water in immediately, not a flood. A gentle soak that wets the top inch. Do this the evening you sow and again the next morning if the sun is hard. 12 inches watered in. That's the whole spec. University of Minnesota. Extension Present Day Current Gardening Bulletin says it plain. Turnips should be planted 1/4 to 1 to 2 inch deep in rows 12 to 18 inches apart. Same numbers Eli wrote in the journal. The land-grant university just confirmed what an 8th grade educated ridge farmer knew in 1943, and they teach it today because it still works. A packet of open pollinated turnip seed will run you $2 at any farm and garden store. A bunch of turnip greens in the winter produce aisle will run you $3 to $4 for enough to feed one person one supper. 1 packet sown right is a fall and winter of that supper. They'll tell you the reason nobody grows their own winter roots anymore is convenience. Fine. Believe that if you want. Or you can look at who owns the winter produce aisle and notice that a family that fills a cellar in October doesn't shop that aisle in January. Not a conspiracy, neighbor. Just how markets work. Nobody forbid you the turnip. It got forgot because there is no money in you feeding yourself. And there is a great deal of money in you pushing a cart every week for 6 months. The day you sow at dusk, not noon. Give the bed a full drink. Cover with a light straw mulch until the seedlings break. That gets the seed in the ground. The next piece is what most folks skip. And it's why their turnips come up crowded and stringy and never worth eating. Everything so far your grandfather could have taught you in a single afternoon in the garden. What's coming next is the seed rack, the produce aisle, and the extension pamphlet all got very quiet about somewhere between 1950 and 1970. And it's the piece that turns a turnip patch into a two-season food supply. The third piece is what makes this crop feed you twice off one sowing. Cora Ellison never wasted a leaf. She ate this patch as a green through August and September and dug it as a root October onward. Two crops, one planting. You go out in the cool of the morning when the leaves are still stiff with dew, and you cut the outer leaves with your fingernail top to bottom, one from each plant, leaving the crown to keep making that supper. When seedlings are 3 to 4 inches tall, thin them. Pull the weakest and closest. Leave the strongest every 3 to 4 inches down the row. Do not throw the thinnings away, rinse them and eat them. Those are the first supper this bed feeds you. Once the plants are 8 to 10 inches tall, cut outer leaves for the table. No more than a third of the plant at a time. Leave the crown alone. It will keep producing greens for weeks. When the roots reach 2 to 3 inches across at the shoulder, start pulling. Small ones are tender for the kitchen. Bigger ones store. If a hard frost is coming and roots aren't fully sized, that is fine. A light frost sweetens the root. Pull before the ground freezes hard. University of Minnesota Extension again. Present-day gardening bulletin. Harvest turnips when roots are 2 to 3 inches in diameter. 2 inches. That's the width of the seed packet you started with. The land grant confirmed what every homestead knew. Bigger isn't better. Bigger is woody, thin at 4 inches. Cut greens at 10 inches. Pull roots at 2 to 3 across. That's the calendar. The failure mode is leaving the bed unthinned. You get a mat of leaves and no roots. Ruthless thinning is the difference between a supper and a season. Another failure is cutting more than a third of the leaves at once. The plant stalls and the root stops sizing. Take 1 leaf per plant per cutting. Turnip greens are safe to eat, but wash them well twice in cold water. Sand hides in the ribs. That's the one part you don't skip. Mark your calendar for 4 weeks after sowing. That's your first thinning and your first supper. Now here's where the August heat starts trying to kill the bed. The next piece is how you keep it alive through the worst 2 weeks of summer. The fourth piece is the piece that decides whether you have a crop at all. You are asking a cool season plant to break ground in the hottest weeks of the year. That is a fight. You know it's working when you walk past the row at first light and see 1,000 tiny green loops arching up out of the soil still wet from the night. You know it's failing when the surface crusts and cracks like a dry creek bed by noon. Water the bed morning and evening for the first 10 days, just enough to keep the top half-inch damp. Not soaked, damp. Lay a thin blanket of clean straw over the row after sowing, about the thickness of a hand. As soon as the seedlings show, pull it back to the sides of the row and leave it as mulch between rows. If the sun is brutal in your climate, a scrap of old bedsheet or shade cloth propped a foot above the bed on sticks for the first week is old, cheap, and effective. Once seedlings are 2 inches tall, water deep and less often. Encourage the roots downward. Do not overhead water in the heat of the day. Water goes on the ground at dusk or dawn. There's a line in that journal from that first summer Eli wrote it. Sow at dusk, straw down, wet twice. 6 words. That's the whole heat management plan of an 8th grade mountain farmer. And the extension bulletins now teach the same thing in 3 paragraphs of Latin. First August patch I put in alone. I was maybe 14. I sowed it in the heat of the day because I was bored waiting for supper. Bed dried out by noon. Half the seed never came up. Eli walked out, looked at it, didn't say a word about the failure, just handed me more seed and told me to sow the second round at dusk. Cost me a packet. Taught me the crop. You'll botch one somewhere too, friend. That ain't the end of the system. That's how you learn it. This week, when you sow after the sun is off the bed. Water immediately, cover with straw. Check morning and evening for the first 10 days. You get the bed alive through August, you get a crop by October. That's when the last piece kicks in. And it's the piece that decides whether you eat this crop in November or in March. Notice what none of this has cost you so far. a packet of seed, a little sweat. No massive outlay for 4 months of food. What's coming next is the piece that replaces the appliance in your kitchen that runs 24 hours a day and shows up on your electric bill every month. The fifth piece is how you hold this crop from October to March without a refrigerator. This is the piece that decides whether the Cora Ellison's patch feeds her in November or feeds her 4 kids all the way to the last frost. You walk down into a good root cellar in January, and the air is cold on your face, but wet, not dry, and it smells like earth and clean stone. You put your hand on a turnip you dug in October, and it is still firm, still cool, still supper. Pull roots on a dry day. Twist the tops off about an inch above the crown. Don't cut them. Twisting seals the wound. Do not wash the roots for storage. Brush the loose dirt off with a gloved hand. Water is what starts rot. Reject any root with a soft spot, a crack, or nick from the fork. Eat those first. Only store the sound ones. The storage spec is as close to freezing as you can hold without freezing and as humid as you can get without water dripping. The old range is 32 to 40 degrees Fahrenheit at high humidity. The easy version, no root cellar, is a wooden or plastic box lined with slightly damp clean sand or sawdust layered. Sand, roots not touching, sand, roots, sand. Keep the box in an unheated basement corner, a garage that stays above freezing, or a crawl space. Check monthly. The old-time version is a working root cellar, a spring house, or a straw and earth clamp outdoors in a cold climate. The sensory tell it's working is firm roots, wet-looking, no smell. The sensory tell it's failing is soft spots, blackening, or a sour fermenty smell. Pull the failing ones out, or they take the neighbors with them. The land-grant extension services still teach this. Cool and humid slows the respiration of a root. That's not folklore, that's plant biology, and it hasn't changed since Cora's day. What changed is that somebody put a fridge in your kitchen and told you the box in the corner of the crawl space was primitive. The box in the corner of the crawl space runs on zero electricity and holds a winter of food. Your fridge holds a week. You can buy a bunch of turnips at the grocery in February for $3 or $4. That is the bill this box in your basement kills week after week for 6 months. Storing washed roots is a failure. They rot. Brush only. A warm cellar is another failure. Above 45, the roots sprout and go soft. Get a cheap thermometer. Any root that turns soft or smells sour, that one's done. Toss it or feed it to the compost. That's the one part you don't skip. Sound roots keep. Bad ones spoil the box. Before October, set aside a corner of an unheated basement or garage. 1 wooden box, 1 sack of sand, 1 thermometer. That is your winter refrigerator, and it does not draw power. Do all 5 of these pieces and you'll eat off 1 July sowing until February. But there's a 6th piece nobody teaches. It's the piece that means you never buy a packet again. And it's the piece that turns Cora Ellison's 1 July morning into a system that feeds her family every winter after that and every winter of her grandchildren's lives. Cora Ellison, that widow in the Ohio garden in 1936. 4 children, no husband, a milk goat, and a dozen hens. What she planted the last week of July fed her family until March. And here's the piece I didn't tell you. She had been planting that same turnip patch for 11 years by then, and she had not bought a packet of seed since the year her husband was still living. She was carrying the crop forward herself. That is why she never handed a grocer a dollar. She wasn't just growing a winter's food, friend. She was growing next year's seed. Here is the 6th piece. In October, when you're pulling roots for the cellar, pick out 3 or 4 of the best, not the biggest, the best shaped, the healthiest, the ones true to the variety. Set them aside. In a cold climate, replant them the following spring, roots in the ground, crown just at the soil line. In a mild climate, leave them in the ground over winter under mulch and let them go on their own. Come the 2nd year, those roots bolt. They send up a flower stalk 3 to 4 feet tall, yellow blossoms, then long, thin seed pods. When the pods dry brown on the plant, cut the stalks. Hang them upside down in a paper sack and shake. That sack fills with hundreds, sometimes thousands of pale oval seeds. That is next year's packet, and the year after, and the year after that. Purple top white globe, open pollinated, will breed true. That is why they patented hybrids, friend, because a saved seed is a bill they will never collect from you again. Cora Ellison figured that out in 1925. It's still true tonight. This was never really about a turnip. It was about being the kind of person who does not have to ask a produce aisle whether their family eats in February. One packet of seed, one July morning, 6 pieces, and you are out from under a bill that most Americans now pay without ever noticing they are paying it. Your grandfather could do this. Your great-grandmother did do this. And somewhere between 1945 and 1965, the truck showed up at the loading dock and nobody got the chance to pass it down to you. That's what I'm here for. You don't have to build all 6 pieces this week. Do one thing. Between now and Saturday, drive to the farm and garden store and buy one packet of open pollinated purple top white globe turnip seed. $2, put it in the kitchen drawer. On the last week of July or the first week of August, depending on where you live, put it in the ground. That is the whole first step. One packet, one bed, one evening's work, and you will eat off it into next year. I've run it myself more years than I can count. It cost me next to nothing. Tell me down below, did your people plant a fall turnip patch, or was it something else where you're from? Rutabaga, fall spinach, storage cabbage. The crop that gets the most comments is the one I go deep on next. The same way your great-grandmother fed a family off ground like yours. One small packet at a time. Now you know how to. Don't let it die with you. Next time, the one plant your grandfather grew along the fence that fed his whole flock for free, and the year the feed companies made sure it left the seed rack. Keep the old ways they kept. If this story changes the way you look at the simple seeds in your hand, please subscribe and like this channel. We are unearthing the history and the skills that they tried to bury. Let's plant a more secure future together. The next treasure of knowledge will be open soon.